The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of golden sand beneath an unforgiving sun. The air shimmered with heat, and every gust of wind carried a trace of dust that clung to armor, skin, and memory alike. It was a place where even time seemed to move slowly, reluctant to cross the barren miles. Through this vast emptiness moved the army of Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, thousands of men and beasts advancing steadily across the Syrian desert. Their banners fluttered faintly in the scorching wind, the crescent symbols catching the sun like silent prayers. The Sultan rode among them, his white turban wrapped against the heat, his gaze firm but thoughtful. For weeks, he had journeyed from Aleppo toward Damascus, inspecting garrisons, meeting tribal leaders, and ensuring peace in lands long scarred by war. The Crusaders had retreated for now, their armies scattered and weary, and a fragile stillness had settled over the region, a rare pause in a world consumed by conquest. Yet even in peace, Salahuddin's heart was restless. For him, leadership was not rest upon a throne, but the weight of thousands of lives balanced on his conscience. He had known hunger, he had known hardship, and he carried those memories like verses engraved upon his soul. In the silence of the desert, he often reflected, not on victories or wealth, but on the responsibility that came with power. As his army approached a small oasis, glimmers of water broke through the dunes. The men sighed with relief, dismounting their camels to rest and drink. Little did they know that beneath the calm of that afternoon, an event was about to unfold, one that would reveal more about their sultan than any battlefield ever could. At the edge of the oasis, where a few palm trees bent under the weight of the heat, two Bedouin men began to quarrel. At first, it was just raised voices, tired travelers arguing in the sun. But soon, anger erupted like a spark in dry grass. One of them shouted that his camel had been stolen. The other swore that the animal was his by birthright. Within minutes, the commotion caught the attention of nearby soldiers, who separated them and led both before the Sultan's tent. Salahuddin emerged quietly, adjusting his robe as he stepped into the sunlight. His face bore no sign of irritation. He was not a ruler who hid behind guards or ignored the cries of ordinary men. When injustice called, no matter how small, he answered. Both men fell to their knees before him. Dust clung to their faces, their lips cracked from thirst, but their pride remained fierce. One began his plea, saying that the other had taken his only means of survival. The accused denied it bitterly, claiming the camel as his since his father's days. Salahuddin listened without interruption, his expression calm. The heat pressed heavily on everyone present, but the Sultan's patience felt like a cool shade. He could have left the matter to an officer. He could have dismissed it as a trivial squabble. Yet he chose to judge it himself, because for him, justice was never beneath a sultan's attention. He asked that the camel be brought forth. When it arrived, the animal stood quietly beside them, its eyes half closed from exhaustion. Salahuddin observed both men closely. Lies had a scent of their own, he often said, and truth left traces even in silence. The Sultan stood still for a moment, his gaze shifting between the men and the animal. Then, in a voice soft but commanding, he ordered a bowl of water to be brought. When it was placed before him, he spoke to the first man. "If this camel is truly yours," he said, "then it will come to you when it hears your voice. Call it." The man nodded quickly and began to call the camel's name. The animal lifted its head, twitching its ears, but hesitated. It shifted its weight, uncertain, taking a single step forward before stopping again. Then Salahuddin turned to the second man. "Now you," he said simply. The other man called out. His tone was steady, familiar, a sound carried not just by words but by memory. At once, the camel turned toward him and began walking, slow but sure, until it stopped beside him, resting its muzzle on his arm. A murmur spread among the soldiers watching the scene. Salahuddin remained quiet, his eyes studying the expressions before him, the relief of one man, the shame of the other. After a pause, he said, "Truth does not always lie in speech. Sometimes it stands quietly, waiting to be seen. He turned to the first man, the one who had falsely claimed the animal, and asked him to rise. The man's shoulders shook as he began to weep. In a trembling voice, he confessed that hunger had driven him to deception. "My Sultan," he said, "for 3 days I have eaten nothing. My children cry in the night. I saw this camel and thought perhaps I could feed them with its sail." For a moment, the desert was silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Salahuddin's expression softened, the sternness of a ruler giving way to the compassion of a man. He ordered both men to remain where they stood. Then, turning to his officers, he said, "Bring food for this man and his family, and give him from my treasury enough gold to sustain them until they can stand on their own." The first man looked up in disbelief. "My Sultan," he whispered, "you reward me even after I lied before you?" Salahuddin replied gently, "I do not reward deceit. I answer need. Justice punishes the act, but must also heal the reason behind it. Hunger is no crime, but stealing can become one if mercy is absent." Then he turned to the rightful owner of the camel and placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you," he said, "remember this day. Show kindness to your brother, for Allah loves those who forgive when they have power to punish." The Bedouin bowed his head and agreed, tears filling his eyes. The soldiers around them remained silent, humbled by what they had witnessed. Salahuddin then looked toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows over the dunes. "Let this be written," he said softly, "that no matter where justice is needed, even in the heart of the desert, a sultan must not turn away." That day, word of his judgment spread throughout the caravan. Soldiers spoke of it around their fires, and even the humblest servants repeated it with awe. They had seen their ruler's greatness not in battle, not in wealth, but in fairness, a fairness that came from faith, not fear. Night fell over the desert like a velvet cloak. Stars emerged one by one, and the campfire flames danced in their reflection. The Sultan sat apart from his commanders, the Quran resting open on his lap. He read quietly, the flickering light casting golden lines across his face. One of his closest men approached and, after bowing respectfully, spoke. "My Sultan, you lead armies, you command empires, yet you spend your time settling the quarrels of peasants. Is this the work of a ruler?" Salahuddin closed the book gently and smiled. "If I turn my eyes from the poor, how will Allah bless me against kings?" he asked. "A ruler who ignores one man's suffering is unworthy of leading thousands. Justice is not divided by rank or riches. It is one light, and if I let it fade in small matters, it will not burn bright in great ones." The commander bowed deeply, his heart stirred. He realized then that the Sultan's strength was not in the armies he led, but in the humility with which he served his people. As the night deepened, the Sultan looked toward the endless dunes. The wind carried the faint cries of jackals, the rustle of palm leaves, and the sigh of sand shifting in sleep. He whispered softly to himself, "Power fades, thrones crumble, but justice remains the only throne that stands eternal." Centuries have passed since that night. The desert has changed, kingdoms have risen and fallen, and time has buried the footprints of his armies. Yet the story of that day still drifts like wind over sand, retold in whispers wherever fairness is remembered. They say a ruler once stopped his mighty caravan to judge 2 men over a single camel. But what truly mattered was not the animal, nor the quarrel. It was the message he left behind. That leadership is not proven by wars won or lands conquered, but by the moments when power bows before conscience. And so, the desert still remembers him. The Sultan who judged under the sun, whose mercy quenched more thirst than the oasis itself. Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, the man who turned even the emptiest wilderness into a court of justice.